All right, we are live. Dinga and DeRosa, House Enterprise, House of College Hoops podcast, joined by Matt St. Jean. Matt, Michael, how are you both?
It's a Friday afternoon, and I'm talking college hoops, so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I love being here. I mean, there's nothing better than talking college hoops. Bit of a weird last week or so, but we survive, we thrive. Time to kill the game.
Yes, today, Big East preview today.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to preview every single conference, starting with the Big East. We do have some Big East news before we get into it. A cook officially entered the transfer portal. Michael, what's the scuttlebutt on where he goes, and how does this impact Georgetown?
He'll end up going to West Virginia. West Virginia the story goes that him and Jose Perez went to the same high school, Putnam Science something or other. I forget exactly the name of the school.
Putnam Science Academy.
Putnam Science Academy. I was right. I should have trusted my gut sometimes. But yeah, they went to the same high school. More money, West Virginia. West Virginia's desperate for the roster because of the whole Huggins Eilert situation. I think they lost two guys. They lost were both bigs, so they needed a big. You get a stretch big like a Cook. I think it hurts Georgetown from the perspective of I think their best path to almost relevance in the Big East was being able to zag where everybody zigged. And if you have a five like a Cook, he can make sure the floor is spaced, block shots, all that sort of thing. You'd be able to space the floor and kind of like almost get like a Klingon or a Kalkbrenner or whoever like out of their game in a sense. I thought that'd be their best path. So now you don't have that. Your bigs are Ryan Mutombo and Supreme Cook. That's not great. So I'm assuming they're going to add more spots considering they have 10 roster spots filled now and 9 if McKenna isn't eligible on day one, which he reclassed as late as he did. I feel like that's not super likely. So they're going to end up filling more spots. It's just a matter of who and, well, actually, if and who.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because Ed Cooley has kind of become known as a guy who plays his teams through the post and through his bigs. And I think a lot of that, I mean, look at Nate Watson and the Friars a couple of years ago and the way he constructed that offense. So losing a big as talented as a Cook is tough when you think that that'd be a pretty strong part of the offense. I will say, though, you go back to earlier Providence teams, and there were a lot of teams in there with no true center and instead two forwards who would do a lot of the offensive scoring, two smaller guys, Emmett Holt and Rodney Bullock doing a lot of that work if you go back a little ways. So strategically, I'm interested to see how Ed Cooley adjusts around this. It's going to put a lot more of the emphasis for the scoring and the defense on the guards for Georgetown because that front court – the players have not been all that productive. Supreme Cook's been productive, but not at the high major level. These guys have not been that good in college, and there's also no depth there. You need at least one more body in the post.
Oh, yeah, they need to get more guys. It's just a matter of who, but we'll get to that later. That's a tease. Yeah. That's what they call it in the business.
A tease. Well, one person they can't get in the portal now is Mac Etienne from UCLA, who recently committed to DePaul. Etienne wasn't very impressive at UCLA. He was a former 4-star recruit. Just didn't have a great career over there. But he was, behind some really good bigs. Dembona, like you're just not going to carve out too much time. It is a body, and DePaul needs bodies down low. So yeah, I think it's an overall net win, I guess.
Yeah, I like the addition for them. They needed some size. I think jury's very much still out on how good of a player he'll be at the high major level. But as a guy who came into college with talent, was highly regarded at his position. And if DePaul can get even just a little bit of that out of him and showcase it, that can get things going in the right direction for that program.
I think considering Etienne came in with the COVID year and redshirted, I think he still has 3 years of college eligibility left. So
I believe he tore an ACL in there too.
He did a medical redshirt then. Because he came in the COVID year, I think.
Yeah, I think he's played 2 seasons and still has 3. Yeah,
he reclassed back in the day.
Yeah.
So he's still a pretty young kid. So you never know. Give Stubblefield a couple of years to develop him, and I don't know. Maybe next year he's a big piece.
Yeah, and he's the tallest player on that roster. DePaul has at 6'9" Churchill Abbas, I do not know how to say his name. From Nigeria, and then 3 guys at 6'8". So only 2 post guys there for the Blue Demons as well. You look at Georgetown and DePaul. I don't know what these teams are going to do against Donovan Clingan.
Yeah, we'll jump right into the rankings here. So I had Michael, Matt, and then myself compile Big East preseason rankings. And then if you had Marquette winning the conference, they would get 1 point. If you had DePaul getting last, they would get 11 points. Then I just took cumulative scores. So let's start out here. The number 1 team in our rankings is Marquette. Surprising, unsurprising, total ranking of 1.33, 2 firsts and a second for the Golden Eagles.
Yeah, Marquette was my number 1. I think the argument for not putting Marquette number 1 would be that they've already reached their peak. They've already peaked. That they hit their ceiling in terms of like efficiency. And to an extent, I see that. Like I don't think they're getting much better than they were last year. But if I got a team that returns just about everybody, I'm gonna take them. I have questions about almost every team in the top 3. Marquette's question is, has they reached their ceiling? That's the one I'm least worried about, because they're either going to be as good as they were or they're going to be a little better. You lose Omax Prosper, that hurts, but I trust that team enough. They're going to gel together. They know how to play really well together. You're returning the Big East Player of the Year. That's just my number 1. It's the safe pick, and I'll play it safe sometimes.
Agreed there, and I also had them number 1, so I think, Chris, you're the odd man out, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts here. It was tough. It was close for me between Marquette and UConn. I've gone back and forth, but I like the consistency with the Golden Eagles. I have a lot of faith in Shaka Smart, at least as a regular season coach here. And it's just a lot of good players on that team, and you have good incoming freshmen, guys who are role players last year who should be in bigger roles this year. And I like the idea of rising sophomores and maybe rising juniors playing better ball in that system than some of the freshmen that UConn is going to be relying on to be important pieces this year. So that's what gives them the slight edge in my eyes. Chris, what were you seeing?
Yeah, Matt and I were talking offline here just before this, and we were kind of talking about how, yes, you lose Omax Prosper, but maybe even the bigger loss for Marquette is David Joplin as the 6th man. So he'll have to start now, and you don't have that very reliable scoring option off the bench. The depth I'm not in love with. Like, they're a very good team, but there's a reason why on Bart Torvik they're the number 4 Big East team. They're number 17 in the country, number 4th in the Big East. They're number 35th in Torvik's projections for defense. I don't know. Like, there's a reason for that, and it's because there's just not a whole bunch of depth that's super proven yet. I love Kolek, and Oso will continue to get better. He made great strides last year, but I don't know. For me, I just think when I look at the rosters and the coaches, I just think UConn is just more impressive. Spoiler, I put UConn at number 1, but yeah.
When I think you look at this Marquette team, and there's questions about like if they've maxed out. The guys who are supposed to be the best players there are guys who weren't really like top recruits. And sometimes you just see those guys hit a ceiling and you expect them to keep growing. It doesn't happen. You also add in, look at the computers. Marquette kind of hit a plateau near the end of last season. They were rising and rising and rising, and then ended somewhere in the teens, I think, or at 10 on Ken Palm, something like that, even though they kept winning. And I think that's because the metrics didn't – like the metrics always saw UConn is better than Marquette last year. So if Marquette is the same team next year that they were this year, they're a team that is probably outside the top 10. And with some of the other Big East competition, that could land you 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th in the conference, depending on how good you think these other teams are.
Yeah, I could see any of the top 3 being number 1. I just think Marquette's the most consistent. And the question we have with them is, have they hit their ceiling? If they have, plus the loss of Omax, that you lose a lot defensively, particularly with Omax, that you lose a lot of like the switchability you're able to do. I think that'd be a big question for them. I think it's how do they replace Omax? But this team has just been so consistent, and I feel like the team like UConn, we don't know who the lead option is there could have some off days. I feel like Marquette's just going to be consistently good enough to win games. The win games that they should. I don't think you're going to see Marquette get upset too often versus I could see like a team that I have 6th beating UConn one day, or a team, same thing, beating Creighton too.
Yeah. Okay, well, we can move on down here. I will zip through this because I don't think anyone's going to be surprised. UConn, number 2 here in our rankings. Yeah, the Huskies they're just going to be really good. The question becomes, Stephon Castle and a couple of these younger guys, how good and how quickly will they adjust to the Big East style of play? Also, I think, Jordan Hawkins is not replaceable. Like shooting wise, he bailed them out a whole bunch. And so I don't know. UConn still is a bit of a question mark, but undoubtedly to me, a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah, and they also, you lose Adama Sanogo. For as good as Donovan Clingan's going to be this year, they had 2 of the best bigs in all of college basketball last season. So no matter what, you always had an elite player at that position. That's not going to be the case this year, and that means there's going to be like 5 minutes out there every game where they're just going to be a worse team than they were last year, and there's no doubt about it. And yeah, they dropped to second for me. They're a national title contender, especially if everything goes right. They could be the number 1 team kind of wire to wire again in a lot of ways in the computers if everything goes right for them. You need to see it actually happen with those young guys.
Yeah, I think my definitely big question with UConn is who's the lead offensive option, because I don't think Karaban or Clingan are necessarily lead options. Spencer, the one thing Spencer really struggled with at Rutgers was when he had to be the lead option. They went to Derek Simpson because Spencer just could not handle it. That was the one thing he could not do. And so is it Castle? I think Castle's good, but I don't know if he's ready to be the lead create option yet, at least on a top 10 team. I think he's good, and I think he can do that, but I don't know if he's there yet. And Tristan Newton also isn't a primary scorer. So I feel like you just don't have the same scoring punch that you had with Hawkins. You don't have the leadership you had with Jackson and the same scoring punch and interior play you had with Sanogo. That being said, though, I took a national, not a national player of the year future, 100-1 I got on DK. The line is way off now. I took Donovan Clingan. Is that, I want to see your guys' thoughts on this before I share what I'm thinking. Is that a good bet?
100-1. Absolutely.
100-1 on Clingan.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think, if anything, my concern with it is that with Zach Edey last year and then how things went in the postseason, you may have voters who are biased against the big man and maybe looking at a guard. But Donovan Clingan, Sam Viceni, I think, he had Clingan as the top NBA prospect in the Big East. And with his size and ability, we've seen him shooting the 3 ball. We'll see if that actually translates to real games here. But if he can do that and he's playing 30, 35 minutes a game at that level with that same efficiency that we saw last year, he'll be in the conversation and he might well end up being the Big East player of the year.
Yeah. One quick question for you guys here. Torvik has UConn 14th in offensive efficiency for this next year. If I bet one of you that they would be worse than 14th, would either of you take that?
Depending on the line, because I think something not even.
I think their offensive numbers are going to be worse than 14th in the country. So then it's like, well, if you don't have an elite offense, then shoot, I don't know if they can win the Big East. So it's tough. This conference is just a jumble.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'm worried about with this team is who's the lead option. And the one thing I'm worried about with my national title, my national player of the year, I don't know why I said title twice, is I feel like just those awards are kind of narrative based and you want to vote for the guy who scores a lot of points. Yeah. And I don't think Clingan's going to be the leading scorer on this team. If he'll give you 13 and 8 in legit defense or something like that, right? I don't know if that'll beat Edey, who will average 21 and 10 guaranteed, even though Clingan might be the more impactful player per se. Something like that. That'd be my one worry with it. But I saw 100-1 and I bet.
Well, I think you've both correctly pointed out the playmaking concerns with this team. I think Andre Jackson really hurts them there. But again, if playmaking is a concern here, I think that makes Donovan Clingan's odds for that even better. Just because I worry about penetration with the guards, and it's Tristan Newton who's not really a creator on his own, and some freshmen, and the cheap and easy answer here is we're going to do a lot of plays designed for Donovan Clingan. We're going to go ahead and copy the Nate Watson Providence offense from a couple of years ago, where every play starts in the post or getting the ball to the post first and then working out from there. And Clingan, I think, can be excellent in that role, can score 20 a game in that role if that's what you're asking him to do. And then off of that, that gives you the kick out options to Spencer and the Caravan on the outside to work things. So I think that can be good enough to be an elite offense in college basketball. Again, if you're getting, it's really like your 3, 4, 5. If you're getting the production that you think you are in the lineup, then this can be a top 14 offense easily.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move on here.
Well, I have a question here.
Yeah.
I saw UConn at 2.33 in that average. Did one of you have UConn not in the top 2 in the Big East?
I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll see.
We got Creighton at 2.66. And here is why. Okay. Here is why this isn't a biased play from Chris. Their shooting is going to be so much freaking better than last year. Shireman will be more productive, in my opinion, like just with who's around him now, with Ashworth being a legit perimeter threat that Nembhard really wasn't as much. Trey will continue to develop. Shireman's numbers should go skyrocketing up. Kalkbrenner, I mean, in small sample size going to the Bahamas, but he looked really comfortable outside. Like, I think that could be a legit part of his game now. Okay, Michael, I saw the head nod. But
did they play anyone in the Bahamas? Like,
yeah,
what are we taking
they were losing at halftime in one of the games.
Was that like?
Is that a brag, Chris?
Were they playing like the national team that had Buddy Hield and Eric Gordon, or were they playing like the scrub team?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know too much about who they played, but I watched the games, and you can see if he feels comfortable or not. And he felt comfortable. The 4 spot's the big question for Creighton, but I like him a lot.
Yeah, I like this Blue Jay team. I think they're going to be very, very good next year. I have them 3rd in the conference, but it's that 4 spot that's holding me back, and especially if you compare that to what UConn and Marquette are bringing to the table. Marquette's got David Joplin, who is still a little bit unproven, but was the 6th man of the year last year and who should be very good. UConn has Alex Caravan, who has just been excellent, and he really came on last year. And it's like, all right, well, Creighton's not going to be able to match that. I love the way the guards fit together. I love the Baylor, Shireman, Stephen Ashworth duo. I think that's going to be electric. I think those guys are going to score a ton. Just worry, a little bit about rebounding. It's going to be a lot of pressure on Ryan Kalkbrenner in the post. And I think that's the difference between being a team that's really in contention to win the Big East and one that has a chance but is slightly outside, which is where I've got them at 3.
I think Creighton's offense could be the best unit in the Big East as a whole. Just the offense. I mean, they're going to be able to score. They're going to, I could argue they have the 2 best shooters in the conference, maybe even the 3 best if I put Alexander up there, frankly. Ashworth, Shireman, Alexander, those guys all probably can shoot 40% from 3, particularly Ashworth. That dude is wet like water. That dude doesn't miss. The 4 spot is one question. You have Trout, Miller. Miller hasn't shown a ton in his college career yet. Trout, I don't think played at all last year. That's one thing. And 2, are they going to play any damn defense? I know Kalkbrenner can defend. Is Ashworth going to play any defense? Alexander's okay defensively. He's not, I'd say he's good. He's not great. Shireman's okay. And then at the 4 spot, I don't really know if you're getting much defensively. I think you definitely lose defensively with, you lose Nembhard and Kaluma. Those, I could argue, were your 2 best non-Kalkbrenner defenders. And Ashworth, where he is an incredible offensive player, especially with how efficient he's going to be. He'll be a marvel to watch. Defensively, I have questions. I think the quicker guards in this conference will just be able to blow by him at times, and it will just look easy. And then you can drive and dish on this team. So there are definitely some worries for me on the defensive end for this team.
Do we think Ryan Kalkbrenner goes 3 in a row here for Defensive Player of the Year?
If he stays healthy, 100%.
Yeah, I don't see who would beat him, but I feel like Klingon. My one argument would be like if their team defense is like in the 70s, you just can't give it to him. Yeah. You just can't, and I think that's a possibility. It wouldn't be an indictment on him, but no motor fatigue. It'll be Klingon. There's a pick. There we go. Yeah. Send it.
I could easily see it being Klingon. I don't think that's a hot take at all, especially because UConn's team defense will probably be better than Creighton's. I'm not sure. A lot of that's going to depend on Creighton at the 4, but
yeah, I think Stephen Ashworth is going to be just fine defensively. He's not going to be great. It'll be worse than Nemhard was, but I think he can hold his own. I mean, Mountain West had like significantly better guards this last year than years prior, and he held his own. So we'll see. But yeah, Matt is 100% right. Where the 4 is where you're going to lose quite a bit defensively. But okay, moving on.
Yeah, go ahead. Move on.
Our number 4 spot in the rankings. Any guesses? Who do we think?
Well, I know who I put, so I feel like there's a little like cheating because I know who I put, but I put Villanova. So
yeah, I put Villanova too. Yeah,
well, that's not good for me. All right, why is it Villanova and not St. John's? Matt and Michael.
Michael, I'll let you go first here.
I think I just kind of trust this Nova team. I think a lot of the guy, like I feel like people are forgetting that Justin Moore is really good at basketball. Like I guess because he was hurt and then he came back and Nova just kind of whimpered. Like they're like, oh man, that guy must suck. It's like, no, he's really good. I don't know why people seem to forget that, but he is. And I love the addition of Tyler Burton. I think he is someone who should be on maybe like late second round NBA draft radars. I think he is really good. He's able to score in every spot on the floor, and I think his addition that's going to be a really switchable defensive team too. They're going to be hard to guard in spots. Like what if you have Hart, Bamba, Justin Moore on the floor? Those you can switch every spot, and good luck scoring on that. Good luck driving in the lane on that. And where you might be weaker at the 5 spot defensively with either Dixon or Lance Ware, I trust that. I wasn't super impressed with Mark Armstrong in the U19 tournament. I thought he played poorly, but I think that's also partially a reflection of how that team was coached and managed. So I'm not putting that on Armstrong. But I really like this team. You're going to have a ton of switchable pieces defensively. You're going to be really good shooting the ball. You're going to be consistent offensively. And where my questions with this team are coaching and, defensively at the 5 spot. I think this team's really being not talked about enough for how talented this roster is. I could argue this is a top 15 roster. And if I had more faith in Coach Neptune, I would probably put them 3rd.
Yeah, and I think this whole group is going to be a referendum on what Kyle Neptune can do. Yeah. It's not like it's basically a whole bunch of veteran college basketball players who have all proven that they can be incredibly productive on winning teams, plus Mark Armstrong. Yeah. And who I think is primed for a big sophomore leap. I like him a lot. I think he's one of the more likely guys to take a big leap this year in the Big East. And if all that stuff happens, there's no excuse for this team not to win a lot of games. Like you said, they're going to play good defense. They're going to be very switchable in the middle and with their guards. And I think you're going to get a lot of scoring depth. I think this is a team that you can comfortably go 7 deep and feel really, really good about the guys that you have out there. You couple that with the experience. If it were a different name, a head coach and a guy with more experience, then I think we're talking about them in serious contention to win the conference. It's just that Kyle Neptune doesn't have a lot of years under his belt here. And we could be looking back in 12 months saying, we shouldn't have doubted this guy. Villanova was obviously going to win the Big East from the start. He learned from Jay Wright. Villanova has another great coach. We could easily be saying that. So I like this Villanova team a lot. I think I worry about the center position a little bit because there's height at other places in the conference. But Eric Dixon's pretty good defensively for his height too. He's very stout. Guys don't back him down very far. So I like this team a lot.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. Now to poop on it a little bit, and keep in mind, I did have them 5th, so it's not like I don't believe in them. I think they're an NCAA tournament team. What is one thing that TJ Bamba, Tyler Burton, and Hakeem Hart have in common? They were really good for not very good teams. I don't know. Like Burton, yeah, you were the guy at Richmond. TJ Bamba, yeah, you were the guy at Washington State. Those teams were bad last year.
Burton was a big part of that Richmond team that beat Iowa in the NCAA tournament. Let's not forget that.
Hart was a big part of the team that Maryland beat West Virginia in the tournament. Those are 2 guys.
Yeah, West Virginia was bad. They were a 9. Maryland was a 9.
Should have won that.
Wasn't Bamba part of that Washington State team that made a run in the NIT too? That's the NIT, granted.
All right, yes. Let's give TJ Bamba credit for being the second man on an NIT run 2 years ago. No, they're all good players in their own right, but they're not necessarily proven winners at the college level yet. So that is I don't know. It's a lot of mouths to feed of guys that are used to being one or two options, and they're not going to be now because Dixon and Moore are better than all of them at scoring, in my opinion. And so we'll see. We'll see how everything flows together.
The team you're going to have next will have a lot of mouths to feed of guys who were 1 and 2 options. They have the exact same concern. So you're going to have to argue why.
But a different head coach, that'll make a big difference there. But yeah, I'm interested to see how Neptune manages the rotations with these guys, because a good player is gonna have to be the odd man out for Villanova.
Yeah, if this team underperforms, I think you're gonna have I would start looking elsewhere for head coach. He just might not be the guy. But this team also could overperform this ranking, and they could make us all look really foolish, because I think that is well within the cards.
All right, on to number 5.
Before we do that, by the way, because we were talking about a cook earlier, we now have a Trilly Donovan West Virginia GIF tweet. So
it's West Virginia. Confirmed.
It's been West Virginia for a while. I even said it on the ECB pod I did a little while ago. Shout out my guy Josh. Those bastards. They stole our guy. We'll talk about some other options when we get there. There's another tease. Yeah. I'm so good at that, dude. I mean, come on. I'm learning on the job here, man. Woo!
You're a good tease. On number 5, St. John's Red Storm.
Michael, this is all you.
Johnny's, Slick Rick, baby. This team is really talented. I think 1 through 5, they're incredibly talented. Sim Wilcher is a just freshman I'm really high on. Jordan Dingle, I'm not going to say anything about him. Chris has got that. I'm not stealing his thunder. I respect my limits, yeah. Joel Soriano, double-double machine. Was he second nationally in double-doubles last year to Zach Edey? Or did someone else jump over and get second place?
He was top 3 for sure. I forget a few
top
seconds.
3 in double-doubles. That guy's he's good at basketball. Let's just put it that way. Definitely the little worry is too many mouths to feed. I don't think Ledlam really raises their ceiling a ton. I think he's a very good player. He'll be very solid in his role, but I don't know if I'd call him great or elite. He'll just be very solid. Same thing. I don't know too much about Taylor and RJ Louise, so I would like to look into those guys a little more. Just because I think if you're Taylor, you were on a bad team last year at Oregon State. Your efficiency numbers, sure, they were good, but how much of those came in garbage time? And also, will he be okay accepting he's a bench player now. Will you be okay accepting that bench role? Same with RJ Louise. I think Louise starts, actually. I've heard very good things from people I trust on him. I just want to look into him a little more just so I can have my own opinion, too. But I think he's going to be really good. And I like Danis Jenkins more than most people do. I figured that out the other day, apparently. I think he's very good. I think he was almost as good as Walter Clayton. And I feel like people put Clayton on a really high pedestal, and he deserves that. But I feel like Jenkins, I couldn't think of his name, was right there. I feel like those guys are about as good as each other. And I think this team is really talented. It's just a matter of how do they gel together? How are they defensively? I've definitely got questions on the defensive end with this team, but I have one of the best coaches in college basketball. So I'm chilling with them at 5th, and I think they should be a tournament team.
Yeah, I was shocked to see that Lunardi had them as the last team in. That seems too low for me, and it's I get why there's questions. It's one returning player, so I get the questions, but it's also, Joel Soriano is very good, and you got a pair of guards there now in Jenkins and Dingle who are very good. And a good 1-5 combo will win you a lot of games in conference play, and I think you got a couple that can work there. And then you got one of the best coaches of all time who never has bad defenses and a lot of veteran players. There's no way this team is going to be bad. I think it's going to be competitive all season long, should win a lot of games, will easily be a tournament team as long as nothing bad happens in non-conference play, and if everything comes together correctly. They'd be a long shot, but they could, be in contention for winning the Big East and could absolutely win the Big East tournament.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Now time for me to wax poetic about Jordan Dingle. I genuinely think he could win Big East Player of the Year. I really do. 23.5 points per game last year, over 60% true shooting percentage at Penn. And that's a Penn team that, yes, they were good, but it was majoritarily because of him. Their second, third options were Nick Spinoso and Clark Slackert, 2 guys that I don't really think could play in the Big East. And Jordan Dingle had them atop the Ivy, in a pretty darn good Ivy last year. So I think he's awesome. And alongside him, there's enough complementary pieces where if Dingle is as good as I think, which is a huge gamble for an Ivy League transfer, but if he is, then I saw somebody asked us on Twitter, what's the ceiling for St. John's? Really fucking high. Like I think top 2 or 3 in the conference. I really do. Yep. If everything pans out, because you have, like both of you said, you have arguably the best coach in the conference / country. And then a pretty intriguing roster with, a couple of guys that are looking to improve draft stocks from their mid-major levels. So I'm excited to watch St. John's.
Yeah, I think for the ceiling, I don't think I'd pick them to win the Big East. I think that's a little outside their ceiling, but like 2nd and 3rd place I could see.
Yeah. I think like they could win it if things, it's basically if everything hits right, they could win it. If you got Jordan Dingle coming in being a Big East Player of the Year caliber guy, and the defense gets to those Rick Pitino levels, and like Zubio Ejiofor coming in, if a guy like him can actually like live up to the hype, Simeon Wilcher coming in, if a guy like him can make an impact right away, then it's like, all right, this team is crazy deep, and that can win you games too. But yeah, I think I like 5th here for the Johnnies.
Yeah, it seems right.
Yeah, I would say that this team's crazy deep. Another concern I have, I guess, very light concern though, is I feel like with Wilcher, Jenkins, and Dingle, those are 3 guards who are best with the ball in their hands. Particularly Wilcher, he is so much better with the ball in his hands when he's playing off the ball. So I feel like there's only one ball. That is a thing. So you have good Soriano is very good and very few touches. He just kind of creates his own touches. So I think he's the perfect piece for them. But still, with those 3 guards, there's one ball. So just want to see how that performs.
I like the idea of lots of high ball screens for them with Soriano, and then using that to, being able to have multiple drivers with the ball means you can have a high pick and roll. The guard's going to keep it, and then he can kick to another guard who will slash behind and things like that. I think it opens up some options for you.
Yeah, and Pitino made Smith and Siva work, so he can do it here too.
Really quick, without looking, what do you think Bart Torvik's projection defensively is for St. John's?
64. That's a right.
If I'm remember, I've looked at this recently. Isn't it outside the top 100, or at least outside the top 75?
It's 90th, which is a legitimate possibility.
And then the thing is, it's just Rick Pitino just doesn't have bad defenses. It's just I'm the defense might not be excellent, but I don't see a world where it's outside the top 75 or the top 60.
Yeah,
I think they'll make it work.
I hope you're right.
Okay. Well, it's a bunch of old guys. It is. That always helps play defense.
Okay, well, moving on to 6th place now. Here's where it's kind of interesting. There's a group. We had the top 4, and then we have a group of 3. St. John's being first. The second one, Xavier Musketeers.
Right on. So did we all put them 6th? Are we unified in this?
6th all around. Yes.
I suspect the next team might be the same all around too, but. Yeah, Xavier's looked really. I like Quincy Liviari. I think Sean Miller's trying to run it back with the Conference USA All-Star Team thing and some better recruits. And it's it worked last year, so I'm not going to bet against it this year. I think they'll be worse, but I think they'll still be a very good team.
I got a problem with the Conference USA All-Star branding. Look, they got a very good Conference USA transfers, but I'm looking at the best players in that league. Jordan, Jelly Walker, Tyler Perry. They're not on this team. So I think the CUSA deserves more credit than just labeling these guys who are very good. I think this team has a ton of talent. If I'm just going back to serious mode. One question I have is, I feel like there's a decent bit of projecting going on with the Xavier team. Claude, we are projecting him to take that jump. I don't know how good McKnight's going to be for this team. I don't know if he's a true 1. I knew they were running Claude at 1 in the Bahamas. We'll see if that happens in the season. I presume it will. There are a couple questions I have with the rotation on this team. I'll get to it later once I more formulate my thoughts.
Jerome Hunter is really fun. I will say Jerome Hunter is awesome. And
I hope he's playing like that. Those injuries are so scary.
I know. Him in, yeah, like if Fremantle, I assume I didn't watch all of their overseas stuff, but I assume he's 100%.
He
I
didn't
assume
play.
he's no.
He didn't play. No.
Okay.
So, but that if they're both healthy, that Jerome Hunter, Zach Fremantle pairing at the 4, you can kind of go offense defense with that. Like there's certain limitations because of the lack of overlap in their skills, but also you got guys who are excellent at one end of the floor, and I think that helps you a ton.
Here's a take. I think Abu Ousmane is their most important big man.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because I know what I'm getting out of Fremantle. I know exactly what I'm getting out of Fremantle. He is a very good scorer, and he can't really defend. He is defending in quicksand. Ousmane is an excellent defender, and you are coming from a North Texas team that played defense. They were so good on that end. I think his defense could take this team up a level, and if he just isn't able to defend Big East guys at that same level, I think their defense could just stink again. And I like Trey Green as a freshman, but he's a bench player. I just think he's really good in that like 6-man spark plug type role. That Lou Williams type role, I think, is what I wrote. Yeah, I think, but I feel like we're projecting a little on Claude. I think Oliveira is their second leading scorer. I just think he's good enough too. But I don't know if McKnight's ready for this level, because I think my main question there would be, he played for a Rick Stansbury team, and I don't want to be mean to Rick Stansbury teams, but they were what I would classify as a stupid team. They just had talent, and they just found ways to lose. So I don't know if I don't think that's McKnight's fault at all, because it happened no matter who the hell Rick had on that roster. Like, he had Charles Bassey on the team, and then he had Mitchell Robinson was on the roster, and they couldn't make the tournament.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Miller's a much better coach than Stansbury, so I feel like they should find a good use for him, but you never know if someone's will almost regress in a sense, but he's very talented. This team has a ton of talent.
Yeah. I think the other name we haven't mentioned is, I hope I'm saying it right, Lazar Djokovic, who they signed this morning, where's he from? I think it's Lithuania?
I thought he was Serbian.
Serbia, yeah. From Serbia, coming over, 19 years old. I appreciate the comment on my haircut, by the way. But yeah, bringing a little bit of size and scoring there, he's a big question mark. Xavier, there's a whole bunch of question marks for the Musketeers. Yeah. I think that's why they're in the second tier. But like, it's Sean Miller, and there were a lot of question marks in my eyes last year, and he made it work. So I'm gonna assume he makes it work until we see it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's all I have for Xavier. You guys hit it well. As Matt predicted, a true 7 for the Providence Friars. I do think this is the right order of the two of them, Xavier and Providence. But I think I'm more excited to see what Providence does. I think the ceiling is higher, and maybe that is a hot take, but the ceiling for Providence is higher than Xavier.
I'd agree.
Yeah, I would say of the 3 teams here in the second tier of the Big East, Xavier, St. John's, and Providence, Providence may end up being the most talented of the 3, at least the high-level talent on the roster. The question is the coaching. Kim English is a guy who has kind of been a media darling for a while, and everybody around him absolutely loves this guy. It's why he doesn't stay in one place very long. He keeps getting promotions because people love him. He also has been a head coach at the college basketball level for 2 years and has never been a head coach at the power conference level. So it's a whole new world for him. And he's jumping in the deep end right away with a team incredibly talented with high expectations. I'm curious to see how things get balanced. They're already talking about spreading the floor more. I like the way this team comes together. You're relying on Jaden Pierre taking a jump. You're relying on Corey Floyd Jr. taking a jump. You're relying on Garway Duel being what some, including Sam Viceni, have said about him as a possible one-and-done type of talent. If you can get that production, the high-quality production out of your guard group, then with Bryce Hopkins, this team that's not no ceiling, but this team can go very far. The counter is that there's a world where things fall flat for all 3 of those guys. Kim English is not the head coach you think he is, and this team completely misses the tournament.
I think this team has a very high ceiling and a very low floor. I think they probably have the widest range of outcomes of almost anyone in this conference. I am worried about the point guard play. I have not seen Jaden Pierre do much. Same with Corey Floyd. And I think Dual is very good. I think he's a multi-year college guy personally. I think he could use 2-3 years, and then he could be maybe like a lottery pick type guy. I just think he needs a little bit of time to develop and like shore out some of those elements of his games that like I have questions about, particularly as like a ball handler and pressure. I guess that makes me a hater. I think he's very good, and I think he could be in the league in a couple of years. But year one, I don't see it. If that makes me a hater, then so be it. And the Kim English has said a lot about pushing tempo and shooting a ton of threes, where I think pushing tempo helps. His team doesn't really have a ton of shooters. Duval isn't a shooter. Carter's not a shooter. Hopkins is not a shooter. Where those guys can make shots, I wouldn't call them shooters, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think they're like 40% three guys.
Well, and I think that's what makes this season so interesting is that it's a group with a ton of talent. You are relying on player development in year one of a head coach here to a huge degree. You're relying on Bryce Hopkins was very efficient in low volume as a three-point shooter last year. You need him to become a knockdown guy this year at the 4. Corey Floyd was a guy who looked really good in stretches as a shooter. You need that. You need him to be a Jordan Hawkins type this year, probably not to that degree, but to be that guy that comes in and it takes that year 2 leap. He's not going to shoot like Jordan Hawkins did. I don't know if he has that ability, but a guy who can just hit a ton of those shots. And Garway Duel, like Sam Viceni, loves his shooting. And a lot of people have said that it has improved since the last time he played. You hear that about every single player in the summer. Let's see what happens when it's on the court against real guys.
One more thing before I let Chris speak, just to interrupt him as much as possible on his own show, where he's first. Kim English hasn't coached a good offense at George Mason, and where I said Rick Stansbury and Western Kentucky were the captain of the stupid teams, I think if you looked up a stupid team in the dictionary, it would show whatever team Rick Stansbury is coaching. Kim English at George Mason, those teams made some just mind-numbing mistakes down the stretch. It's just like how this team, you saw like the ceiling in that team. Like they beat Maryland, like they smoked them. And it was awesome. That was like a
Kim English's 4th game ever as a head coach.
Oh my God, they smoked them. That was so electric. Oh, that was awesome. But then like they go down the stretch in the A10 in a bad A10 and they underperformed twice. So I just have so much questions with him as a head coach. He is awesome at the media stuff. And I think in our like little Slack chat before you guys like really knew he was the coach, I was like, dude, he'd kill the media stuff. It's just the on-court stuff.
And he's a really good recruiter, too. He's an excellent recruiter. It's just turning and stuff. And he didn't have great offenses at George Mason. They also had a lot of their best scorers hurt this past year. So it's very tough to evaluate him as a coach. Chris, I am going to add one more thing before you go here, because I think it's important when you look at the schedule for the Friars, too. Providence opens, you got your 2 bye games at home week 1. Week 2 of the season, games 3, 4, and 5 for Kim English as head coach of the Providence Friars. Home against Wisconsin, a team that could be in the top 25 for that game. A neutral site game against Kansas State, a team that we saw make a run last year, and then a game against either Georgia or Miami on neutral site. He gets those 3 games in a 6-day span in his second week. I think we're going to learn a lot very early on in his tenure about what the Friars look like, what he wants to do, and how put together this group is.
Chris, I'm going to interrupt you one more time.
Go ahead, please.
Joshua Duro is good at basketball.
Yeah, no, I was so surprised nobody mentioned Oduro the whole entire time. I was set up so well, but no, never mind. No, Oduro and Hopkins as a 1-2 punch of like athletic, physical, big forwards is going to be awesome. Like really fun to watch, and they're going to clean up the board super well. This team, it has to be built on physicality for them to win. I think they just have to out tough teams. Because they're not going to be super awesome at shooting. They just got to be just tough and gritty. And Devin Carter can do that. Hopkins Oduro can do that. Yeah, if the guard play steps up, if Pierre steps up to the plate and is a serviceable Big Ten or a Big East guard, I think this team could be pretty darn good. Yeah, tournament. I think tournament is like, if they make the tournament, it's a successful season. If they don't, it's a disappointment.
I could tell you expectations around Providence. You ask some people, they're going to say this team should win the Big East. So I think, expectations are all over the place for this group. I know there's a lot of excitement around Kim English, which also makes things difficult because even if Kim English is an excellent head coach, then it's still tough in year 1 with expectations that high to meet them. And it's going to be a fascinating situation to monitor all year long.
I think another thing I'm a little worried about is that they did overperform last year. Like, I feel like in preseason rankings, which granted don't mean shit, even though, we're doing them. So actually ours mean a lot, but everyone else's doesn't mean anything. I just a little worried that maybe that team overperformed and we might see a little bit of regression just naturally, and that could be attributed to the coach when it shouldn't be.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that the 4-game skid the Friars had at the end of the year has been attributed a lot to Ed Cooley and, thoughts of greener pastures there. And I'm not sure how much of that is the case. And there's locker room stuff, things like that. But I think last year's team also had fatal flaws. And I think it's tough to evaluate because last year's Providence team was really bad in stretches and also played like a top 25 team in stretches. And I don't know, it's Jekyll and Hyde, and I don't know which one's real. And if the good one was real, then this is a Providence team that arguably could or should be a top 25 team this year if things come together. If it's the other way around and that 4-game skid we saw at the end is truly how good these players are, then I think the Friars should just be happy to make the tournament. And that would be an improvement on what we saw at the end of the season.
All right, moving on. Actually, one more quick thing. The top O rating player on Providence projected by Bart Torvik is Corey Floyd. I mean,
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by that because that's also an efficiency thing, and I think he might be in that sweet spot where he's like the high level role player where he'll be able to be super efficient because he's not being asked to do all of the things that Devin Carter or Bryce Hopkins or maybe even Jaden Pierre as a ball handler are being asked to do.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
Numero
8. We're breaking the trend of just true numbers and getting back to some decimals here. Georgetown, number 8. Thoughts, questions, concerns, feelings?
This is where I had Georgetown. I guess I'll start because no one else wanted to speak.
I think the two of you had Georgetown at 8 here. That's what I'm seeing.
Yep.
What? Okay, we'll get to that when you speak. I had Georgetown at 8. I'm very high on Jaden Epps. I will have a write-up on him coming up soon. I've looked at a lot of it. He is one of the best downhill guards I've ever seen for a freshman. I think he was underrated in that recruiting class. I think he is really, really talented. He gets to the lane so well. He is so crafty. He has so many different ways he can get to the lane and finish. And truly, I think he is someone who could average 15 points a game. I think he is one of the best few guards in the conference that no one is talking about. I think he's really, really good. And when I look at the rest of this team, I think when you have someone of that talent who will finally be used properly, because Brad Underwood did not want him to score, because I don't know what Brad Underwood is doing with his guards at some points, because Terrence Shannon and Jaden Epps are so talented, but they were both almost the exact same player. So there was no dichotomy there. I don't know. That's a rant for another time. I just think Jaden Epps is so talented. And when you look at Rowan Brumbaugh, he was a top 100 kid. Very good playmaker. He played with my little brother one time, so shout out to him for that. So I'll talk highly of him there. But he also played really well in Georgetown's Kenner League, which granted means nothing, but I just think he looked good, and that's a good thing. Ish Masood, you have guys who can space the floor and hit shots. You're definitely worried inside, particularly with the loss of a Cook, and they will need to add someone else. You have 10 guys on the roster right now. You look at the list of guys available. It's Malcolm Dandridge, who was okay. He was fine for Memphis. He was playable. I think he played 20 minutes a game. You have him, Alia, I don't know how to pronounce it. He's a player from Argentina, played really well in the U19 things. He is someone who, the international kids get a lot of NBA buzz, but at the same time, it's they could make the NBA or they could just be nothing. So when you're recruiting international kids, particularly this late in the cycle, it's a boom or bust. And if they bust, you got a kid in August and he busted. So what? And if they boom, you look like the smartest guy on earth. So it's basically almost you set yourself up and you can't fail. So I think he's someone you bring in, just high potential, and I see what you can do there. But I think Jaden Epps is going to be really, really good. And you have shooting with Heath and Masood. And I think Brumbaugh's legit. I think this team could surprise people, but at the same time, there are still questions, particularly inside. And I think and with depth pieces too. And I think those questions are legit.
Yeah, Epps is going to have to be awesome. And look, Masood, what's going to have to happen is Masood's just going to have to play a little bit bigger than he did last year. He's 6'9". He's a smallish 6'9", but he's just going to have to play a little bit more down low, which is a bummer because he is best when he can pop out and shoot quite a bit. So, but unless they get another big, that's just what's going to happen. I do think go ahead.
I was the one here. I had Georgetown 10th.
Yeah.
So I'm the odd man out here, and I feel like I should explain that. I like Jaden Epps a lot too. I'll agree there. I'm not really sold on the rest of these pieces. Um, I don't think there's a lot of talent on. I mean, there's talent like Drew Fielder. I think is talented. They have some young talent. I don't think there's a lot of proven pieces at all for this season. And if you come into the Big East this week at the center spot and with this much depth, this is the roster we got on August 11th. Will this be the roster in 2-3 months? Probably not when the season starts. But if we're judging based on what happens today, even if they're adding random bodies, I think they're really going to struggle in the paint. I mean, I like Ish Masood, but he's like a role guy to me. I don't think he's like he was a role player on a good Kansas State team last year, and I'm not entirely sure how good he's going to be thrust into a much bigger role here for Georgetown. They might be asking him to be the second best player on this team right away, and I don't know if he can do that. And after that, I have a lot of questions. Like Wayne Bristol and Jay Heath and Dontrez Styles aren't guys that are moving the needle for me. Supreme Cook has been productive, but as a high major starter or high major big minutes guy, I'm not entirely sure. Ryan Mutombo hasn't done much, and that's all of their experienced players. That's all of them. So I think it's going to be Epps and a whole lot of guys who are just okay. And Ed Cooley's a very good coach. I think they're going to be well coached, and that's going to make them better. But I think, you can only do so much with the players you got. And if you're Georgetown, you're already kind of looking forward to 24.
Ed Cooley, man. That he is the reason I had him at number 8. After talking about it with you both, maybe I would move him down to 9, but I just don't love any of the teams 8 through 11 in the Big East. I think it's a really, really great conference, 1 through 7, and then 8 through 11 is
Yeah. Well, I think you go back to like Ed Cooley's early years with the Friars too, and there were a lot of teams with elite guards and very few wins. Yeah. And I feel like we might see something similar where it was, Bryce Cotton and then not a whole lot else and 4 wins and in the basement of the Big East. And I feel like that's kind of where Georgetown's going to be starting here.
I think you said proven players, and for the most part, I agree. I think Jay Heath is more or less proven. That is a guy who has averaged efficient double digits in the ACC, Pac-12, and Big East. I think that's exactly what you're going to get out of him this year. He could be probably like a third scoring option, we'll say, if Masood is 2, which you recruit Masood. Masood would have gone to a mid-major unless you offered him a bigger role. So he's going to have a bigger role, and apparently Cook wasn't particularly happy with that. I can't confirm that, but that's just what they say. I feel like, I don't know, I'm really high on Jaden Epps. I think he is someone who will really surprise people. I think he's special. There are not many guards who can get to the lane like he can. He is so good. Just controlling
I think he's
fouls, all that.
I think he's excellent. I think the counterpoint to that is that, look at DePaul last year and how good their guards were in stretches and how well they played and how much the team still struggled, because the Big East is really, really good. And I think you look at DePaul last year, and really good guard play with a weakness in the paint is not a good recipe.
Well, DePaul also couldn't play a lick of defense, and I hope this team can play a lick of defense.
Yeah, but
Michael, I feel like Epps is going to be your last year's Mike Miles. I feel like that.
Mike Miles is so good. He does not get nearly enough credit. Oh my God. Undrafted? Are you kidding me?
Okay, that's my bad. Listeners, that's my bad. Awful. I shouldn't have done that.
Awful. Jaden Epps is a star. And there'll be another kid I'm talking about in the next team who I think is going to be a star as well. Maybe not this year, but down the line.
Is it the next team? Mm-hmm.
Oh, no way. Oh, no. Never mind. I stand corrected.
So this is interesting because I had Seton Hall at 8 for me, and the thing, Chris, I don't know if you have Bart Torvik up at the moment. I don't know if you can reference these numbers. Bart Torvik is very high on Seton Hall for next year. I believe it has the Pirates ahead of St. John's in the projections, which I think is too high. But it's a group that should be a lot more bought in than the group we saw last year. And I have questions about the defense, but Shaheen Holloway always gets it. I do not love their paint players and their guys at center. But outside of that, I think it's a Seton Hall team that I think should be very solid. And it seems like, to me, they seem like one of those teams that's just going to win like 6 or 7 Big East games by just hanging around and wearing you down and playing fundamentals in a lot of ways. And I don't know. I kind of like the makeup of the Seton Hall team relative to what we saw from last year's group. I think they're better put together for what Shaheen Holloway wants.
Yeah, they Bart Torvik, you're right. Torvik has him hovering around top 50. I'm with Matt. I had him above the last two teams on the list here. The roster, any roster with Kadari Richmond, I'm going to be a pretty big fan of. He's just so good, both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. Adai Wusu from St. John's is a pretty good addition, I think. He gets out of kind of a broken system at St. John's, and Shaheen Holloway, I think.
R.I.P. Mike Anderson.
Right, yeah. So I'm kind of curious what happens with that. Elamir Dawes, there's interesting pieces. I'm more interested in Seton Hall than I am in Butler or DePaul.
I really like the guard trio. I think that Elamir Dawes, Kadari Richmond, and Dylan Adewusu all play nicely off one another. And I think they can play well defensively together, too, I suspect, with Shaheen Holloway. And if you get anything out of the 4 and 5 spots of that lineup, it's a team that you just don't want to play. I don't think they're a tournament team, but they're one of those teams that'll really wear you down and, they'll beat somebody good. That right there is the kind of team where if Creighton has a bad night defensively, like we were talking about, all of a sudden, you're the Blue Jays and you look up and you're in a slugfest with Seton Hall in Newark at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and you got to find a way to figure out how to win that game. And they'll do that to a couple teams next year.
Yeah, it'd be 34-30 with 3 minutes left. I think for the Seton Hall team, I got very arrogant because the first few on my list was exactly the way I thought. So I'm like, oh, this is definitely just my list. He's playing a joke on me. All right, so you win this one. I think with the Seton Hall team, they're going to be very good defensively. And in turn, I think they're going to be a team that is very good against the spread. I think they're just going to stay in games. They're going to be competitive 90% of the time. I don't trust them offensively. Shaw ran some really good stuff at St. Peter's, but last year's team just could not score the ball on anyone. They just could not. And I mean, I think they dominated Butler twice, but they scored 70 points in those games, and those Butler teams just quit. They were wet fish. They just did not care. I'm not going to badmouth people that aren't here. But man, it's just you can't, if you quit against this team, they will break you. But if you don't get broken, I don't know if they're going to really have the talent to score a ton. They didn't really land anyone that really made me change the narrative on this team. I think they're going to be very good. They're going to be in a ton of really competitive games. I could see them being 2-8 in 5-point games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I see that.
One other thing, I guess, with their defense was pretty decent last year, but I remember talking to you both kind of around the Big East tournament last year where the defense didn't really hold up against top-tier competition. They got routed by Kansas, gave up a bunch to Marquette both times, a bunch to Creighton.
Iowa.
Yeah, when they played top-tier competition, the defense just didn't really hold up. So it is a different team. Hopefully it's a little bit different this year, but if it's the same story and they kind of are able to play great defense and beat up on the bad teams, it's not going to get you anywhere near top 8 in the conference.
Well, I like this group more than I like Georgetown, just because I think they might be – I don't know. I trust Shaheen Holloway's defense. I think they're going to be better defensively than Georgetown's going to be, and they got some veterans. I love Jaden Epps. I think Jaden Epps individually is better than any guard that Seton Hall is probably going to have next year. But that trio of guards, I think, will combined just be a lot more productive than what Epps and Heath are going to be able to do. And that's all right, I wouldn't I think Seton Hall and Georgetown should probably split, but the Pirates could sweep that, and it wouldn't shock me at all. I think Seton Hall has more high-level talent to go steal a game from one of the higher teams than Georgetown does.
I think of this group that we've talked about and of the next two teams, spoiler alert, from St. John's or even Villanova down, not St. John's down. I feel like Seton Hall's defense could be the best individual unit on any of these teams. The problem is their offense could also be the worst individual unit on any of these teams. So I need them to score, but they will defend.
Here's the thing. Seton Hall's post players next year were not rated very well defensively from where they're coming from, and I think that could be an issue for the defense. I do think the offense is going to be better, though. I think like Kaderi Richmond's in a much better spot to facilitate the offense than he was last year, and Adewusu fits.
Yeah, I like Dylan Sanders too. I liked him coming out of high school.
And Dre Davis in there as well.
Yeah.
So Matt had Seton Hall at 8. I had him at 9. Michael had him at 10. And so we got 2 teams left. For all of the podcast listeners, I'm just going to go through really quick. Marquette was our number 1 team, and then UConn, followed by Creighton, Villanova, St. John's, and then a pretty sizable drop-off after that to Xavier, Providence, Georgetown, Seton Hall. 2 teams left. The next one, and penultimate team, is the Butler Bulldogs. Michael, I'll let you take it away here for Butler.
This team, I mean, it's a completely new look roster. Now, I think you return of the guys who played last year. Connor Turnbull played in like 10 games-ish, probably 12, something like that, and Jalen Thomas. I'm definitely a little worried about this team inside, particularly in this conference, and Jalen Thomas isn't a guy who can space the floor, but they'll at least want it more, and I think that really matters. The last year's team, sure, they had some individual talent. They did not give a shit. They didn't give a shit. That season was dead when they got smoked in Providence. Season was dead at that moment. They stopped caring. There was no team chemistry, nothing. They were dust at that point. It was pretty embarrassing. But different look team. They're going to care this year. And offensively, I think Telford's a decent lead option. And you have like guys who can actually hit shots this year. DJ Davis is an excellent shooter, like 40%, and he's coming from a winning program. And I think that winning culture really helps at Butler because you had him on a good team. Jalen Thomas was on a Georgia State team that I loved, and I talk about every chance I can. I don't know why I talk about a team that ended up being a 16 seed 2 years ago as much as I do, but I do. That's my life. I just think, and Posh is the lead guard. I'm definitely a little worried about just shooting outside of Davis and Finley, who I'll talk to why I think this kid's a star. Also, shameless plug, Space, Sunday, be there, be square. With Finley, he'll be there. Finley, he's a star. I think this kid is special. I think maybe he won't be on day one, but there are not many guys who can shoot the ball like he can. He is good in space, but he is a dynamite shooter. You give him an inch, and I swear, that kid will wet it in your face, and he will not bat an eye. He will have a game where he plays against some really good team, and he shoots. You're like, all right, it's 25 points on 7 of 9 from 3. Butler stays competitive in a game they absolutely shouldn't. Kid is special. He is special. And yes, I saw you a little laughing. That's right. Ha I'm cheeky with it. Ha, you never know when Michael might throw in a double entendre. Woo! But seriously, that was a terrible bit. I'm sorry. He is special, I think. And I think if he's as good, he can raise the ceiling. And to a guy who I've heard good things about, granted, part of the good things could be like maybe you're not going against great competition yourself, but I think I could argue that Gusto Casilla, if Butler overperforms this expectation, this preseason ranking, whatever, it will be in part because of him. He is 7 feet tall. He's 21 now for a freshman in college. Sure. But he looks to be athletic, very athletic. He can jump at the gym. It's just a matter of can he do enough to stay productive on a basketball court and get legit minutes. That'd be the question. But if Butler overperforms this expectation, it's because he's legit. There are definitely some worries with this team, but I want them to be really good. So maybe that's why I ranked him above Seton Hall, and you guys can fight me now.
Well, I had Butler over Georgetown in mine for similar reasons. I think this team has a little more depth of talent than Georgetown does. I think like kind of like the 3rd, 4th, 5th best players on the team, they're going to be better. I like Casilla too. I think that's a good addition, and it's year 2 of a culture build here for Thad Matta. And I'll just bet on that over year 1 for Ed Cooley. These things can take time to build. So of these, and I think I think Georgetown, Butler, and DePaul are all kind of close here at the bottom of the Big East. I'm betting on Thad Matta is the best coach of those 3 teams. So that's why I had Butler 9th for me.
Okay. There's no pieces outside of DJ Davis, I guess. And maybe Posh because he's kind of fun, that intrigued me a whole lot. DJ Davis, by the way, I think could be actually pretty good. All Big West guy at UC Irvine, pretty darn good shooter. If Finley Bizjack is as good as Michael thinks he will be at shooting, that could be a pretty decent 1-2 punch of like just pure sharpshooters. but I don't know. There's nothing here that screams they're going to be any better than last year, and they were bad last year. And so, yeah, I had them 10th. I thought about 11th. I really did, but didn't do it. Couldn't pull the trigger.
I think you're underestimating Telford. I think Telford's probably the leading scorer on this team. I think he's legit. Yeah. I think he's someone on the wing who can, like, this team last year, they were not physical on the wings. I think that is one thing that'll change. You definitely lose some, like, skill, just raw, like, shooting from someone like CMOS. But I think this team they'll be much more physical next year, and they'll rebound better, hopefully, even though you're in a conference with a ton of legit bigs, and Jalen Thomas is likely your starting 5, who's 6'9", I think, listed. But I think Telford on the wing is legit. I think he's someone who's very good at getting to the bucket. All right, jumper, nothing special, but I think he's a physical presence, and I think he could I think he could lead this team in scoring.
Yeah. Well, I like all these teams at the bottom of the Big East for the most part. I think to be more competitive than they were last year. I think the only concern then becomes, where do the wins actually come from? Because I don't see Butler, Georgetown, or DePaul beating UConn, or beating Marquette, or beating Creighton, or maybe even Villanova or St. John's, depending on what happens. I think those are going to be tough wins to get. There's only so many wins to go around in conference play. And I think some of these teams might perform better, but you're going to have to see some of that growth in non-conference play right off the bat.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. No surprise here. DePaul with a true 11 rating. Everyone had them last. Yeah, and I did think about it just because their backcourt, arguably to me, is more enticing than Butler. I think Jalen Terry is actually pretty darn good. Caleb Murphy, Chico Carter, they have interesting pieces. They won't win many games. Mac Etienne doesn't fill any holes down low, in my opinion. He's not the answer. So it's disappointing because I want Stubblefield to succeed, but it's not the roster, man. It's just not.
I feel like this is second, third year in a row of us saying that. I like Caleb Murphy here. Like Jalen Terry, Caleb Murphy is a really interesting backcourt. Murphy, he broke his hand and kind of lost momentum last year and never really put things together. I want to see what he can look like with another year of experience. Deshaun Nelson is one of the more fun players in the Big East. I think that dude will rip a rim off a basket at some point here. He's just a ferocious dunker. Like Zion Cruz is tough. He's a guy who came in with relatively high expectations for DePaul, and it just didn't happen for him last year. And if he puts it together this year, then that could help out DePaul a ton, and they could really move up these rankings. But got to see it.
Yeah, I think DePaul could actually overperform this ranking. I don't know if you're getting much inside at Mac Etienne. I need to see him do it before I buy in, because I really haven't seen him do much at UCLA. Like, I think he averaged 1-1 or 1.6 and 1.9. So I guess 2-2 if you want to round up. That's not really going to do it for me. Churchill Abbas I've heard good things about him. I haven't seen him play, and it's very hard to know what you're getting out of these international guys without seeing them. So there. I like Elijah Fisher, though. He's someone they brought in the portal, and I think he was a top 30 recruit in some sites when he went to Texas Tech. Good athlete. Played with Canada at the U19 games. I think he's really good. I think he's someone who not enough people are talking about. I think he could be one of their better players. And Jalen Terry, I like Jalen Terry too. I think he's just solid. So out of those pieces, you got something, but you got nothing. I mean, we're talking about other teams being bad inside. You got a guy who averaged 2-2. He's a ceiling guy, and if Mac Etienne hits his ceiling, that changes a lot, but he averaged 2-2. I need to see it before I can really buy in. And I need to see DePaul be good before I can buy in, because at least with Georgetown, like, you were given, like, they've been terrible the last few years, but you were given, like, change. There's something different happening. Same with Butler. They were terrible last year, but there is change. At DePaul, it's a lot of the same guys, really. So and you lose Nick Ongenda, who was...
You lose... It's a lot of the same guys except for the key players when you did win games last year, and it's... The momentum that DePaul is trying to ride is the 24 hours where they have a blocked shot against Seton Hall to advance in the Big East tournament, and then 25 minutes against Xavier in that game before the wheels fell off. So This year, how many did they lose? 12 games in a row to end the regular season last year. I'm pretty sure DePaul beat Villanova in the regular season and didn't win a game until beating Seton Hall in the Big East tournament, if I have that right. Something along those lines. So yeah. Things did not end on a good note. Well, they ended on a good note, but everything before that was bad.
Before that, right? Yeah. I guess two other things with them. Jeremiah Oden comes from Wyoming. Wyoming was just such a shit show last year that he was pretty good 2 years ago. And like Wyoming, that was one of my massively bad takes last year. I thought Wyoming could have been really, really good, but didn't work out. Ethan Anderson, Jake Kyman, Max Ekpongpolo, all three of the California transfers all leave like mid-season. So and Wyoming was.
And they go a level down too. Those were guys who were really high. You're like, all right, Wyoming could be something. Nope.
Right. So maybe he gets back to what he was a couple of years ago, in which case I think he could carve out some pretty good minutes. Question for you both. If you have this roster and you just teleport Nick Ongenda onto it, still 11th or no?
I would probably end up with Georgetown 11th in that and DePaul above them, just because, legitimate post player I think helps a lot in this conference with some of the guys you have at the top.
They would not be 11 for me either. And even if they got Isaiah Miranda, I know they were after him. He was someone who ended up going to Oklahoma State. He had legit NBA buzz. First of all, if you would have taken Isaiah Miranda at any point in that draft and you are an NBA team, you need to give your head a shake, because that kid didn't play a minute in college. And he was good in high school, but he didn't play a minute in college on NC State. He couldn't get off the bench. You need to give your head a shake. That being said, that kid has legit potential, and it leaps off the page. So if they even got someone like him, I'd be pretty high on this team relative to everyone else. But I need to see something inside before I can buy in. And I want to buy in. I just can't, because DePaul is a team that they will be a game where they're 23-point underdogs or something. And it's all right, that's too many points. And then I'll bet it. And then they'll lose by 27. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll make that mistake a couple times this year. I know I will.
I want to correct myself here. It wasn't DePaul's last win wasn't against Villanova. It was against Xavier. They had a stretch where they beat Villanova and number 8 Xavier in a 3-game stretch, and then did not win a game for the rest of the regular season, which is just incredible. I'm remembering now too, the last time they had beaten Villanova, the Patriots were undefeated and headed towards the Super Bowl in 2007-08 season. That's how long ago that was. So momentum that they got some big wins last year. They were so injury ridden that it's hard. Yeah. I think you got to take a mulligan on last year, and I'm not gonna judge DePaul too harshly for what happened last year because of the injury situation. But there's no positive momentum with the roster for this year.
Now in 2023-24 season, your Patriots could be worse than my Commanders. How it turns.
Hey, they play. Was that October, early November? And they play each other this year.
Sam Howell season, you are so screwed. You're favored in 2 games this year. Oh, you are so screwed.
That's one of 2 games I've had marked down as a sure win for the Patriots.
Don't you dare, bro. Our we have defensive line good, everything else shit. But if you aren't doing a fantasy draft, never actually, you know what? Maybe one of my buddies in my home league is listening to this, so I'm not going to say it, but don't know what I'm thinking.
Left hand up.
Left hand up, Super Bowl, baby. Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl.
Don't draft any Commanders players ever.
Terry McLaurin. I got him on my dynasty team.
I had him last year, and he was a disappointment.
He's my wide receiver 3 on my dynasty team.
Yeah.
That's good luck, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a lot of football talk for college football. I don't know if you guys are doing this on your previews, but I want to ask it of you guys because I want to make a prediction here. Who wins Big East Player of the Year?
Yeah, that was my last thing.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to go.
Sorry to jump you on your own podcast.
No, that's perfect. I'm between 2, but I am going to stick to it. I'm going to say Jordan Dingle wins it.
All right. Michael? Did we lose Michael?
Oh, no. Yes.
He's frozen. He started talking about the Commanders and everything stopped working. That
StreamYard gods decided, okay, we've seen enough.
Yeah. I'm between 2 players, and neither is Jordan Dingle here. My kind of obvious pick is going to be Donovan Clingan. If he ends up being the guy everybody thinks he'll be, I think he wins it. It's weird. My kind of underdog prediction here is a guy who was a unanimous Big East first-team selection last year who's got no buzz at all, and that's Bryce Hopkins. If Providence is good, I think Bryce Hopkins is going to be a huge, huge part of that. I think Kim English is going to get him in space. He's going to unleash that shooting ability, and if he does that, he's a guy who could average 20 and 10 here for the Friars next year. And if that's the case, then I think he'll win it.
Yeah. He's right there. Kalkbrenner is right there. I think Kalkbrenner could win it. From Michael here, I got a text that says Donovan Clingan because he wants his bet to hit. So
all right, then I'll take Bryce Hopkins then if he's taking Clingan.
Okay, it is interesting. The second straight year of the Big East being like, okay, we just mentioned. I said Dingle half because I love him. The other three names mentioned, all big men. Yeah, it's a big conference.
And no Tyler Kolek in there, the reigning Big East Player of the Year, who's back. I think he could very well do it.
Yeah. All right, Matt. Well, hey, thank you for hopping on here. It's been fun. Anything else?
Having me.
You can see Matt Road to the Garden.
Yeah.
What do you got cooking, Matt?
All kinds of Big East stuff at Road to the Garden, the podcast, the website articles, things like that. If you're interested in Patriots coverage too, I'm over at CLNS. Now we have our Pats Nation Network podcast, which we did a show last night. Preseason has started. The NFL is here, so if you're listening to this and you're a Patriots fan, you want to check out that coverage, go over there, and on Twitter at Matt St. Dream, MattStDream.
There we go. Well, for Matt St. Dream, Michael DeRosa, and Chris Dinga, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.